On this Sunday night, tension intensifies. The war of words as China defends buzzing a U.S. warship in international waters.
Accidents can happen that could cause things to spiral out of control.
We need to be eyes wide open on China.
The top-level talks and next steps after our exclusive reporting and that close encounter in the Taiwan Strait. New details as investigators dig into the cause of India's deadly rail disaster. Heard of quiet quitting? What about stay interviews?
A retention issue could relate to how an employee is being managed.
The new post-pandemic labor market buzzword, building a better workforce. And from the Paralympic podium to real-life heroism.
I got a call from Jessica. I've got her. She's alive.
A Canadian athlete and her canines' incredible rescue.
Global National with Farah Nasser.
Good evening to you, and thank you for joining us. We begin tonight with the superpower blame game in the wake of our exclusive reporting from the Indo-Pacific region, where our global news crew witnessed firsthand a Chinese warship buzzing a U.S. Navy destroyer in the Taiwan Strait. Our camera captured this dangerous maneuver on Saturday. A close encounter, the U.S. says, was intentional. Speaking at a top-level security summit in Singapore today, U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin labeled China's actions irresponsible and called on China to rein in that kind of conduct that could cause things to spiral out of control. The Taiwan Strait, which is in the disputed South China Sea, lies within international waters. But China says freedom of navigation patrols by other countries are a provocation. Our Mackenzie Gray is aboard HMCS Montreal with the very latest. Mackenzie.
Farah, HMCS Montreal has left the Taiwan Strait, but the busy seas we saw there have followed us on our journey. As we move into the East China Sea, so does the People's Liberation Army Navy, continuing to shadow the Canadian and American warships on a joint mission, traveling through international waters. But the traffic increased today, first with a pod of dolphins alongside the Montreal, then with an Australian and a Japanese warship meeting up for a new mission.
Essentially, we're going to be just working with multinational partners to promote the free and open Indo-Pacific region.
The Chinese ship launched one of their helicopters, circling the Montreal twice before flying off, an action not viewed as concerning by the Canadians.
They'll send out their helicopters to see who's operating off their coast, figure out who we are, where we are, and they try to figure out what we're doing, but we try to keep that to ourselves.
The new exercise pre-planned, and not a response to yesterday's close call between USS Changhoon and a Chinese warship in the Taiwan Strait, a maneuver the Chinese defense minister defended. Li Shangfu calling the joint Canada-US mission a provocation to China, saying the United States is truly the primary cause of tensions in the South China Sea. But our exclusive video from yesterday tells another story. The Chinese warship steaming across from the left, cutting off the Changhoon only 150 yards from its bow, after telling the Americans on the radio to move or get hit. The Changhoon needing to slow down to avoid a collision. American Indo-Pacific Command calling the maneuver unsafe and a violation of maritime rules.
This is a clearly provocative and arguably unprofessional event. And I would say that the Chinese captain knew exactly what he was doing. This was not an accident.
As you can see behind us, the Montreal has met up with the Canadian refueling ship, the Asterisk, which was providing diesel and other supplies for the final leg of our journey.
Looking forward to more of your coverage. Mackenzie Gray aboard HMCS Montreal. Thank you. Now, the close encounter captured by our global news crew has triggered a war of words between China and the U.S. and deepening discussions among defense ministers meeting at a top-level security summit in Singapore this weekend, where the state of China's relationship with Western powers, including Canada, Australia, and the U.S., is very much in the spotlight. David Akin reports on the high hopes of repairing frayed relations.
Days ago, it was this Chinese Air Force fighter jet buzzing a U.S. reconnaissance plane. Then, Saturday, it was a Chinese Corvette cutting off a U.S. destroyer. The U.S. Defense Secretary said Sunday these are dangerous provocations that must stop.
I call upon the PRC's leadership to really do the right things, to rein in that kind of conduct, because I think accidents can happen that could cause things to spiral out of control.
But the West's contest with China is not just about planes and ships. There are confrontations over semiconductors and trade. over cybersecurity threats to infrastructure. And in Canada and elsewhere, allegations of Chinese foreign interference.
We need to be eyes wide open on China. And the fact is that they have become an increasingly disruptive global power that really fuels our view in our Indo-Pacific strategy that we must be eyes wide open with regards to this country.
Canada will boost its military presence in the region with plans to deploy 3 Navy frigates to the Pacific next year, up from 2 this year.
China, though, believes these are examples of the West trying to contain it, in the same way NATO's strategy was about containing Russia.
And this Chinese military officer at the Singapore Security Summit suggested that the West's containment strategy provoked the war in Ukraine.
Have you ever thought that whether this way of containing itself is a problem or it's a kind of failure proved by the war in Ukraine? Thank you.
Hours after the summit in Singapore ended Sunday, the U.S. said it would send a top State Department official to Beijing next week to spur talks aimed at easing tensions. David Akin, Global News, Ottawa.
Now to the escalating wildfire fight threatening communities right across Canada, forcing thousands of people from their homes. From BC to the Atlantic provinces, there are nearly 400 active wildfires burning across our country, and more than 200 remain out of control. Most of the fires are in Quebec. We're going to have more on that situation in a moment, but first, there is some reprieve coming out of Nova Scotia tonight, whereas Mike Armstrong reports some of the province's worst wildfires ever recorded are now contained.
The largest wildfire in Nova Scotia's history is now at least not growing. The rain this weekend was enough to stop it from spreading.
It is fantastic to see. Not a person is complaining out there. I met with crews last night. They were sopping wet when they got back off the fire line, but they were smiles.
The Shelburne fire covers about 250 square kilometers, but enough of it is contained that the evacuation order is being lifted for some areas, and an important highway in the region, the 103, will reopen Monday. Evacuees say the progress isn't just the weather, but also credit firefighters.
They're wonderful. They're tired, they're exhausted, but they keep on trucking to save our homes. And I want to be a fireman when I grow up.
At the Upper Tantallon fire outside Halifax, progress. The fire is now 100% contained. But about 150 homes were destroyed, and there's still an evacuation order in place for hundreds of others. Some neighborhoods have reopened, more will reopen soon. But there are homes that made it through the fire that are inside what are being called areas of significant impact. The homes around them have been destroyed. Those residents may not be allowed home, the city says, for 10 to 14 days. Now, regular life has returned to some reopened communities, but there are changes. The Stillwater Lake development was built with only 2 ways in or out for hundreds of homes, and they lead to the same road. Last Sunday, when the evacuation was ordered, it meant people trying to get to safety were in a bottleneck.
We were probably about 45 minutes from the time we left our driveway to the highway. And
how long would that take normally?
6 minutes. 6 minutes.
Well, under emergency powers, the city is adding emergency exits to some developments. This new road runs from Stillwater Lake directly to the highway. The exits will be locked and only opened in an emergency. The hope is they'll never be needed. Mike Armstrong, Global News, Upper Tantallon, Nova Scotia.
In Quebec, there are nearly twice as many fires burning this year compared to the average number of fires over the past 10 years.
There's about 141 fire all over Quebec, and our firefighters are still fighting 35 of those. Why 35? It's because we concentrate our battle on these fires because we want to protect human life.
Around 14,000 people across Quebec have been forced to leave their homes as flames inch closer. Officials say 100 members of the Canadian Armed Forces are being deployed into the fire zones, arriving tonight to help with the firefight on the ground. And staying in Quebec, where search efforts have been called off after the body of a missing man was recovered in the St. Lawrence River late Saturday, following a tragic fishing trip that also claimed the lives of 4 children. The man in his 30s was one of 11 people fishing along the shore when the group was swept up by a rising tide. The 4 children, all minors older than 10 years old, were found unresponsive on the bank and pronounced dead soon after. The rest of the group was rescued from the water. Now to India, where at least 275 are dead and some 1,200 others wounded after that country's worst rail crash in more than 2 decades. Railway officials are pointing to a signaling system failure as the likely cause of Friday's disaster involving 3 trains. As Redmond Shannon reports, even more clues are emerging surrounding the cause and those at fault.
Seema Chaudhry clings to fading hope and to a photo of her missing husband. At this makeshift morgue, she is tasked with looking for him among the bodies. To some relief, he isn't there.
I've been to all the hospitals and nothing. I just need my husband. I don't want anything else.
Back at the crash site, hope is gone. The rescue operation over and the cleanup now well underway. Train carriages have been pushed aside to get the track reopened soon, but the devastation is no less evident. The brutal crash on Friday took hundreds of lives and ruined many more. Details of how that happened are gradually becoming clear. Officials say one of the passenger trains was travelling south from Kolkata to Chennai. It appears to have ended up on a side track where it hit a parked freight train. The derailed carriages were then hit by carriages of another passenger train that was travelling north. On Sunday, an official at India's railway board said they're keeping their minds open.
No, nothing is ruled out.
But she did indicate they believe there was an issue with the signalling system. However, India's railway minister says the cause and the people responsible have now been identified, although he didn't elaborate.
Whoever did it, and whatever are the reasons, will be known after investigation.
Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi has said anyone found responsible will face the strictest punishment. Large train disasters like this had once been common in India, and many small accidents continue to happen. But safety has been improving in recent decades. This crash, a wake-up call that more work needs to be done for the millions who use this enormous network every day. Redmond Shannon, Global News, London.
Population growth and political promises. Coming up, why industry experts say the solution to tackling Canada's housing market isn't just about building more. Canada's housing crisis is nearing its boiling point. In 2022, the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation reported that Canada needs to build 5.8 million new homes by 2030 to help achieve housing affordability. It's critical that happens because just last year, this country's population grew by more than 1 million people. That's a record. Immigration accounts for 96% of that growth. As Mike Drolet reports, for average families chasing the Canadian dream, it's an absolute nightmare.
It doesn't make sense. Whatever's happening now doesn't make sense.
From his downtown Toronto balcony, a housing market Phil Warder once saw as attainable is now anything but.
We were putting in bids and we thought we were being competitive. We would go, $100,000, $200,000 over the asking price, and we were getting outbid by $100,000 to $200,000.
Warder and his family are in the same boat as so many other Canadians. Double-income household, good jobs, a kid and a dog, and in need of more living space. But they're stuck in a condo downtown.
You should be able to afford a house.
In theory, we should, yeah.
In reality?
Not so much.
They could buy a house, but Warder doesn't want to live an hour and a half away from his job and extended family in the city. And besides, critics like Environmental Defense worry about the impact urban sprawl will have on pollution.
The affordability crisis is related to actually be able to have homes that people can afford to pay the mortgage on and that are in places where people actually want to live.
Critics also argue Canada's current housing crisis shouldn't have come as a surprise. Housing starts simply haven't kept up with population growth. To catch up, Ontario in particular is getting ambitious, with plans to build 1.5 million homes over the next decade. It's a promise that's going to be hard to keep.
The last time in this province that we built 750,000 homes in any 10-year period was between 1973 and 1982. So basically 40 to 50 years ago.
We have a plan to... Federally, Justin Trudeau has set a goal of 2.5 million homes over the next decade. The bottom line is that industry experts see all those promises as a glass house, and the only solutions appear to be bricks.
I think 24 Sussex is the perfect symbol for a country that struggles to get housing right. If we can't house the Prime Minister and their family, we're in a load of trouble.
The Prime Minister's rundown residence hasn't been occupied in years, and with estimates to fix it running in the tens of millions of dollars, does it even make sense given the larger housing crisis? Mike Trollet, Global News, Toronto.
Ahead, roadmap to retention. What Canadian employers are doing to stop you from quitting. In a post-pandemic labor market, we're seeing new trends emerge from quiet quitting to the great resignation. Well, now there's a new workplace buzz term, the stay interview. And Gaviola explains.
You're probably familiar with interviews to get you hired and exit interviews after you decide to leave, but a newly popular workplace trend is a stay interview.
What essentially you're determining is why an employee wants to stay with a particular employer and maybe even why they'd want to leave.
A stay interview, also known as an engagement interview, helps employers figure out how to make an employee who may be on the fence stay. In a competitive labor market with nearly 1 million unfilled positions across Canada, employment experts say the trend is a game changer.
Interviews cover a range of topics that make a big difference in an employee's life, like the flexibility to leave early to pick up kids from school or take a pet for a walk. Since adopting stay interviews in 2017, the BC Maritime Employers Association has seen dramatic results in terms of retention and employee engagement.
We went from 2017 having approximately 25% of our staff engaged at work to having 78% last year.
Successful stay interviews aren't conducted by a direct boss.
There is, I would say, some virtue in having a stay interview conducted by HR or maybe not a direct manager or supervisor, because a retention issue could relate to how an employee is being managed.
And successful engagement interviews lead to changes.
Pre-pandemic, they had been able to get together and go out for dinners or go out and do genuine activities together, whether it be hiking or go-karting or any sort of fun activities, so that they could bond as human beings rather than just employees talking about work.
In this case, the return of team bonding experiences. Anything employers can do to get a leg up on their competition and help them keep their best workers is a must.
Employers that are not able to do that, they're the ones that are challenged in terms of being able to retain their employees, and that's having a negative impact in terms of their ability to sort of rebound.
I think stay interviews are critical because not only do you learn about an employee's experience, but also it helps you to get information for the organization to recalibrate in our post-pandemic new workplace environment where demands and priorities have shifted.
Stay interviews can help companies survive and thrive. Anne Gaviola, Global News, Toronto.
Next, the former Paralympian and her guide dog going above and beyond the call of duty. Now to an incredible story out of BC, where a Paralympian with a visual impairment and her specially trained golden retriever managed to track down a missing person with dementia. As Kylie Stanton reports, how they did it is simply remarkable.
When it comes to blazing trails, Jessica Tuamala is a bit of a master.
I've been elite athlete and I went to 3 Paralympic Games as a swimmer. Got really intrigued by triathlon.
And so when it came to adding scent trailing to the list, a method of search and rescue that involves tracking the scents of missing persons, the 39-year-old was up for the challenge.
Started reaching out to different organizations and different companies across Canada and across the US, trying to see if there was anyone who would want to work with me.
That's where Lucy comes in.
I am completely blind. I trust a dog to keep me safe and keep me alive, essentially. Good girl, Lucy.
But now together, they're keeping others alive as well.
See your head? A little pressure?
The pair trained extensively with the help of Scent Evidence Canine based in Tallahassee, Florida.
Good girl.
Yeah.
Whether it's a child, an elderly person with memory loss, or a vulnerable member of society, Lucy can now track a person's scent.
This is a very simple tool.
What's proven even more effective if it's collected and stored in a scent preservation kit prior to the search event.
Everybody's scent specific to themselves. So it's just like your DNA or your fingerprint. We've actually done trails and trials with identical twins, and the dogs are able to pick between the two.
Nearly 2 weeks ago, when Tuamala's elderly neighbor went missing, the duo had a chance to put that training to the test. The woman's scent, which had been captured and stored, was presented to Lucy, and off they went.
Took us over 3 kilometers and about just over 40 minutes.
And then it wasn't no time I got a call from Jessica. I've got her. She's alive.
I love.
It would mark the 450th find for Scent Evidence Canine and its partners, a monumental milestone they're hoping to build on, knowing all too well not all paths lead to home.
If there's a way to keep family members safe, and be proactive, then let's do it.
Kylie Stanton, Global News, Victoria.
And that's Global National for this Sunday night. I'm Farah Nasser. On behalf of our whole crew, I want to thank you so much for spending part of your evening with us. Tonight's Your Canada is an overhead view of Niagara Falls in Ontario. Donna will be back with you tomorrow. Until next time, take care of yourselves and take care of each other. Good night.